we haven't even launched yet. So we haven't even launched this product yet, and the stories that are coming out of just the samples that we've been able to get our hands on are absolutely incredible. And so I've asked a few people if you would come up here instead of just hearing me talk all night. Like, we need to hear some stories. So yeah, they're a little nervous. Hopefully they have a swear on. I think that they do. Gary? Yeah. Come on up, Dad.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Gary.
So you're going to hear some different things through each of these amazing stories. And so what I invite you to do is just keep your mind open as to who do you know? Like, who do you know that actually you could see them in one of these stories? And so I am going to start here. Oh no, I'm going to have Marcy and Kate switch because Marcy made Kate cry in Cincinnati.
Okay.
We're just going to make Marcy go last. So if you guys would just kind of explain. If you guys would just kind of explain who you are in just a very short story on how this Entune transdermal, how it's affected you.
My name is Kate Harima. I'm a wife and a stay-at-home mom. I have 6 children. So now you know why I need to wear a square. Yours, as you threw this on me today.
Yes.
Before I was a stay-at-home mom, I worked for the Coast Guard and I worked for the Michigan State Police as a forensic scientist. Part of my job was to work on crime scenes, so I saw a lot of messy stuff, and that came home with me. I didn't sleep. I had nightmares, anxiety, and that's part of the reason that I stay at home now. Tara knew that, and she's also met all 6 of my kids. So she introduced me to the square, and it's been life-changing for me. The first night, my husband thought I was dead. I didn't go over. He had to wake me up. It worked amazing, and since then, I just noticed no more nightmares. I had essential tremor. My tremor is gone. My anxiety is less. For all you that struggle with kids, especially when you have as many as I do, I slap a patch on half hour before my kids are ready to jump off the bus, and it mellows me right out. So I can do homework with 3 at a time now.
Awesome, love it.
Mine's not quite as exciting. I'm Stephanie Bacali, and I'm a wife and a mom of 3. I did hair with Tara for how long? Long time. I am still doing hair at home. But the biggest thing I noticed, I actually wasn't that excited when I heard of the CBD squares. To be honest, I thought I don't have pain, I don't really struggle, but this last month we have a lot going on at our house. We're moving, selling, we might be homeless in the summer, so we have to find a home to live in, and I couldn't sleep at night. I'd lay there awake and my heart would race, and I thought, oh, I'm just gonna give it a try, and I put one on, and it's every night since. I sleep great. My anxiety is just down. I feel calm. I can't explain it, but I get through the day. I know it's gonna be okay, but yeah, just the anxiety part and the sleep. I'm getting good sleep, so that's been amazing.
Awesome, thank you, Steph. Here. This way.
Actually, good that you can't see it.
Yeah.
I'm Marcy Vandenberg, and I used to have 2 very sore knees and shoulder from decades of playing sports, and especially volleyball, which I played in college. But so from the Moringa and the essentials, that helped take care of most of that for me. But the day the squares came, my lower back really hurt. I sit at a desk and do computer work all day, like many of you might do. And I also shoveled a lot of snow, which we all did, but and because it was way back a month ago or so. So my lower right back hurt really bad. So I was like, okay, that's what I'll check it out on. Put it right down there, the square down there. and it was like melting away in about 30 minutes, which I was just blown away. And then it didn't come back. And then part two for me was a couple days later. I'm in the kitchen working, I work at home on a computer, and so up and down the stairs, and I can actually remember what I go down there for now, like into the basement. Because before I'd be like a 50-50 crapshoot if I could remember, I'd be like, well, I'll just come back. But as much fun as that is for me, and it really, for people in pain, I mean, that's huge, so that's exciting. But Ashley, my daughter, 17-year-old, she is my target person for this. She doesn't sleep that great. She's a teen, so it's like raising the dead, you know, to get her out the door. And after 3 days, she was popping up pretty good. And so she's definitely sleeping better. But more importantly, she battles the blues stemming from a crime committed against her when she was little. And so a couple of weeks into it, seeing her a good week to 2 weeks, and as every day gets better, she walks through the door and she's smiling, she's telling a story, she's joking with her dad, and that didn't happen before. She was, I mean, lots of teens are moody, but she was pretty down there and straight to the bedroom. And last night she came in and she just hopped on the couch with us, and we had friends over, and that hasn't happened in many years. So I'm very, very grateful to Dr. Plant and Dr. Johnson for putting this together.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, I can't top all this. I had a knee replacement 7 weeks ago. And for the first 4 weeks, I slept in my straddle lounger because I couldn't sleep in a bed because the nerve endings were so bad in my knee, I couldn't touch it, couldn't put anything on it. And Kelly came along, that's my daughter, right there, put your hand, yeah. She convinced me to try a patch.
I
So
just stuck it on you, I didn't give you a choice.
she put it right here, and it kind of quieted me down. No, actually, right here where they did all the surgery, it was so bad I could take my pulse just by the throbbing. And I put that patch on, and it took about 20 minutes, half hour, then it stopped. And I've been putting a patch on it now for 2 weeks. I'm up and down stairs, I'm back to working, and I feel like $1 million. Oh yeah, the other thing, beforehand I was using Walter cream. You seen that commercial where the ladies at the supermarket grabs that little girl and says, "You smell just like my Walter used to." And she's hugging him. Well, this is what I used to smell like. I don't need it anymore.
My name is Tomasa Martinez. I'm from Mexico. I live here in Grand Rapids, Wyoming. And I have 5 years used the products Moringa, Ameo, the Ameo products. And before I have anemia, the first time they start the osteoporosis in my bones. And I speak a little bit English, but my eyes I have difficulties for see, for read books and everything. And when I drink super mix every day for 3 years, I no more sick. I leave the prescriptions, and I no more drink medications. Only I drink super mix and all the products Sija have. And now I have 3 days for the square. But I have a pain in my back, but the first day no more pain. In my shoulder I use the second hair, and the pain for my shoulder going. I ordered the 3 boxes the CBD. I sent one to my dad to Mexico because my dad is he have fibromyalgia, and he need this product. I have my brother. He has 18 months for cancer. The pain here is a lot of pain, but I already sent this product for him, and he have 2 days use this, and he no have more pain.
Wow.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Really like a celebrity around here. So make sure to get his autograph if you can. No, but he truly is the best of the best. He honestly is. Just know that Dr. Plant graduated first in his class from Harvard Medical School. He has a PhD in biomedical science, and here's the crazy thing. He finished an 8-year program in 3.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, can we say that again? He finished an 8-year program in 3.5 years. So I always tell everyone when I'm talking about him that he's just a little bit smart. He's more like genius status. So if you would, please stand and help me welcome Dr. Joshua Plant.
Thank you. I say graduated, they say expelled, but either way. Now, I'm going to take this. She didn't read my bio completely. I noticed that she took notes up here before, and there's a little bit on my bio. And I wrote underneath it, Intro Dr. Plant, best of the best, first class Harvard PhD, biomedical sciences, 8-year program in 3.5 years. And then in bold, and is exceptionally handsome. She forgot. So I wrote that on the bottom, hoping that she would just read it. But apparently she practiced enough, she didn't have to go to the cue card. So that was my attempt to finally be called handsome. It didn't work. So it's a pleasure to be here. I don't know if I should get this and walk or just stand, so hopefully I'm not too fidgety, but I want to kind of talk up. It's a pleasure to be here. I was here about 1.5 years ago, I think was the last time I was here. And ironically, there was quite the skunk smell that was coming. Does anybody remember that event?
Yes.
Where was it?
That was Ultimates by Michigan State.
Oh, Michigan State, that's right. That's it. Those Ann Arbor folk don't do that, right? Only the Spartans. So I kind of chuckle. My wife is a Michigander. She's from the well, not quite the UP. She's from Indian River. So mid, 20 miles south of the Mackinac Bridge. And so we're actually coming up here as a little bit of a vacation in July. So back to Indian River. So we love Michigan. We come out here all the time for vacations. Beautiful, beautiful country out here. So anyways, I want to talk a little bit about this, making this, obviously with the introduction of that, I could be doing anything I wanted, right? Except for playing sports in college, that was never given to me. As you'll quickly find out, I'm actually panicking because there's a couple of cords right here. I will likely fall, right? I'm very uncoordinated, bow ties don't lie. This pretty much says don't throw a ball my way. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about why am I here, why am I doing this, right? Why do we need to ultimately put a square on us? And I'll tell you right now, my goal is that we shouldn't have to put a square on us. Why all of a sudden are we wanting this? And to kind of illustrate this a little bit, who's heard of the disease pellagra? Anyone heard of that? Well, you have Dr. Goldberger to thank for that. This guy's kind of a cool dude in the scientific realm, right? He's kind of like the Michael Jordan of health scientists. In the 1930s, he was actually appointed for to be the Surgeon General because of what he discovered. Pellagra was a disease that ravished the South. And in fact, in the 1920s and 30s, I think there's about 600,000 people that died and another about 1.4 million that were affected from it. And what would happen is you just didn't die. It you kind of had this kind of degradation of lifestyle. Skin problems, almost kind of like a psoriasis or almost leprosy. You'd develop memory malformations. You'd have a hard time remembering things. You'd have a lot of emotional or mental disorders arising, schizophrenia, and so forth. Well, in the 20s and 30s, you can imagine if you're having schizophrenia, there's not necessarily the best care that would have been done for you. And so this was kind of puzzling. This was this huge epidemic in the 20s and 30s, primarily in the South, that was all of a sudden taking everything by storm. And during this time, they're thinking it's a fungus. It's something that is ultimately being spread. We need to find a cure for this. We need to eradicate it. Thinking of fungal medications, because fungus was a big thing in the 20s and 30s, right? It was kind of this is a cause of a lot of the problems we're facing. And Dr. Goldberger, he tried to take a little bit of a different approach to it. Rather than ultimately trying to come out with a drug or a medication to treat this, he wanted to kind of get to the source of the problem. And he noticed it was primarily in low-income places that people developed a plague rate. Primarily, prisons was the primary focus. And what they noticed, now this is in the 30s during the Depression time, that corn was also becoming very, very cheap to manufacture. There was great advancements in the manufacturing of corn. And so they could quickly go through it. There was this huge production of corn. And because it was getting produced so cheap and easy, it was ultimately cheap and easy to the consumer. So during a time of fiscal frugility, people then started to actually buy more corn in lieu of other nutritious vegetables. And so what had happened is they actually became malnourished in just one nutrient. Just one. Niacin, this typical B vitamin. That's it. And what had happened is it killed hundreds of thousands of people, mental disorders, skin problems, everything under the sword that we never equate to malnutrition. When we think of malnutrition, we think of somebody who weighs like, far below what they should weigh, they don't have energy, and there's, starvation. That's not malnourishment. That is undercaloric, right? Underfed. And this was all because of just one nutrient. That's it, one nutrient. Now here's what's crazy is we're thinking, well, Josh, we don't have pellagra today. Problem solved, go home. We're all taken care of. Nothing could be further from the truth. Most evidence right now suggests 85% of Americans are depleted in at least one key nutrient. You know what's also kind of similar to that? 75% of Americans are at least on one medication. And it's funny because we'll do everything we can to treat it, and we're not obviously focusing on that, which is probably, I don't know. I did I pin this to my shirt? I don't know. And I don't know that those things aren't ever looked at. If 85% of us are depleted in at least one key nutrient, shouldn't we be addressing that when we know history has shown time and time again just one nutrient is going to cause calamity, right? The pirates taught us that with vitamin C, right? So what is going on? What do we need to do? And so when we look at why we're ultimately needing to supplement today, it's by no surprise that we need to fix that which is broken, right? Right now, the food that is harvested, this is absolute study, there's tons of studies that show this. If I go into a typical farm today, pull, let's just say some broccoli, compare it to broccoli 40 years ago, or 50 years ago, it's 40 to 60% less nutritious. And that's just because the soil, ultimately the types of fertilizers that are being used, everything of the sort has made it so less nutritious. Additionally, when we look at this, we're also seeing that a variety of different foods are intentionally removed of their nutrients. Why on earth would anyone ever remove nutrients from food? Well, here's what's interesting, right? When you remove nutrients, guess what it does? It doesn't fill you up as fast. And if ultimately I'm the CEO of a food company, I'm wanting to make sure you keep that second helping, right? And so this is the state that we're in. We're kind of just absolutely famished of nutrients. Now, this I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist here. but I do believe it is a little alarming when the second highest industry in America, second highest profitable industry in America, right so close to the financial, meaning banks and so forth, is the pharmaceutical industry. Which is a little surprising because they lead you to believe we're charging you such high prices so that we can then use this for research and development of other products, right? Why is it not going into research and development? Rather, why is it going into dividends, right? And so these are the things to where there's no real urgency behind solving the true problems that we are facing. I love this. I have a grandfather who's right around 90 years old, an amazing individual, who's out biking all the time, and got way more energy than I do. And I was watching television with the other day, and it was rather interesting. It's always fun to watch television with somebody who's like 1 or 2 generations older than you. One is because there's no expectation of having a conversation because the volume on the television is so and it is also great to hear the commentary. And all of a sudden a commercial came on for restless leg syndrome. And I remember my grandpa looking at me and saying, when I was a kid, there was only polio and measles. What are all these other things popping up? And it's funny because we think they're popping up because we are able to diagnose them or we are identifying them better. I think we actually need to take a step back and do that which Dr. Goldberger did and realize, are there things, simple things, that have changed in our diets that are causing this malnutrition that are manifesting itself in a variety of different ways. Most notably, right, as I mentioned before, and I think this is something that is exceptionally alarming, pellagra was one of the problems associated with pellagra was schizophrenia, a mental disorder, right? And now when we think today, the suicide rates amongst teens, the amount of trauma that is ultimately being experienced, and it's not that the trauma is necessarily more frequent, but people aren't able to overcome it as easily. That we don't equate these types of emotional problems or emotional challenges or struggles people may be having with respect to diet, when in fact they are showing themselves to be very, very correlated. And so with this, I'm going to just kind of start off here a little bit about CBD. When people think CBD, one, they're thinking that this is a sting operation. No, it's not a sting operation. It is completely legal, right? The Farm Bill passed in December, and in that Farm Bill, politicians will never admit they're wrong, right? And I don't know if it's just because they assume that they're always wrong, so they'll only talk when they're right. You know, it's just kind of like a blanket statement, we're always wrong, so just considered a continuous apology. But there wasn't scientists that ultimately helped craft the original bill, right? Marijuana's been around for, well, thousands and thousands of years, and in the 1960s they realized the psychoactive properties of marijuana it scared them. And so what they did is they made it illegal. They made it a drug. And with that, they didn't have the expertise to accurately say what marijuana is. In essence, it's the equivalent of saying, we want to ban fir trees. But we don't know what makes a fir tree, so we're just going to say anything that's green and doesn't lose their leaves, right? And so all of a sudden, juniper trees are gone, everything of the sort, and it's all grouped in. Well, after about 60 years, once all of those politicians left, come in the new politicians to apologize for them with the Farm Bill. And this is where it is a big thing to understand. When we think about this, there's some stuff that people kind of mistake. You have hemp, right? Think of hemp like it is the same species as marijuana, but it's a different variety. So the best way to equate this is male and female. Though plants are typically asexual, meaning they have both male and female reproductive organs, this, just for the simplistic sake, you can think of it this way. It has low THC. In fact, very, very little THC. THC is what makes it fun. Sorry, the patch, the square is not going to be fun. It's going to be effective, though, right? Right? So the THC is what makes it seem like when you're driving in a car at snow that you are ultimately in Star Wars flying through galaxies. That is not what you're going to get with respect to these squares. It does contain CBD though. It's high in CBD. Now, marijuana, which a lot of you may or may not want to readily admit that you've experienced, is high in THC and low in CBD. THC and CBD are actually very, very similar in structure. They just differ a little bit, right? You actually just removed one carbon from the THC and you get CBD. They're both considered cannabinoids, right? And so think of THC like your friend, right? Great guy, or think of CBD like your friend. Great guy, is there for you, is there to help you out. Think of THC like your friend with money. Now it's a little bit more fun, right? We're just giving you your friend without the money. He's there for you, but he's not taking you to the bar tonight, right? So that is the difference. You've got the CBD and hemp, and then you have this. Now you're also going to get people that say, hey, we've got all of this with respect to hemp oil, right? And you might think that's the same as CBD. It's not. Hemp oil is the equivalent of like taking an olive and squishing it and getting olive oil. You're getting fats, right? All of that out of there. You're not getting the actual compounds, phytocompounds in the olive that make it effective, right? That is completely different than the CBD extracts that you will get from a plant, or CBD oil. So when we look at this, marijuana has been used for quite some time, right? Thousands and thousands of years, people have used marijuana across different cultures. I always believe that the greatest evidence that botanical works is how many societies have used it independently, right? So when we think about it, for example, marijuana, we look at it as been used for thousands and thousands of years across multiple societies because obviously it works. Time and different societies don't all come to the same conclusion if it is placebo, right? Now, this is something that is amazing. As we see it kind of throughout history, it really kind of introduced itself into Western civilization in like the 40s, 50s/60s, right? And this is when there was this kind of the clash of the cultures of what's going on, where free drugs are taking it over. All of a sudden, there's a little bit of an irreverence going on with different things, perspectives. Anyways, politics came involved, they banned it, and that's kind of where it's been ever since. Farm Bill passed saying just THC is what we don't like, so marijuana, that's high in THC, is still federally looked at as illegal. Some states have legalized it, but now hemp, which doesn't have THC, is okay. Bon appetit. It's actually the second largest crop in Kentucky.
Wow.
Yeah. So it is well into use, and now because it is so effective, they are actually predicting this to be a $22 billion market within 3 years. It's only 500 million. Which means CBD is expected to be larger than the whole medical marijuana industry and be rivaling actually the protein supplementation industry, so it's huge. Now, why is it expected to be so big? I'm actually going to read something here. Hold on. This is a paper that has yet to be published. It was just recently in Ecology, I believe. Yes, Journal of Pharmacology, just recently accepted. So it has yet to go to publish. Will be published in about 2 weeks. And they kind of give an understanding of what CBD is and the power of this. They talk, for example, individuals with schizophrenia inherently have less CBD in their blood than those that, people with schizophrenia have less CBD in their blood than those that do. Emotional related disorders. It says, circulating plasma levels of CBD are reduced in patients with mild depression and chronic post-traumatic stress syndrome. Supplementation with CBD has been shown to mitigate anxiety-like behaviors associated with chronic stress. Moreover, pharmacological receptors blockade, blah, blah, blah. Then he starts to make it sound a lot smarter than what he is, right? So he starts speaking science. But he talks about in this that you see all of these different types of disorders correlated with low inherent CBD, anxiety and so forth, and that supplementation with it seems to help. Epilepsy, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Fragile X syndrome, anyone know what that is? Right? It's a chromosomal abnormality associated with kind of mental learning challenges. And they talk about this to where in this they show after treatment with a CBD, individuals with Fragile X syndrome, learning and memory performance was significantly improved. Goes on to talk about Alzheimer's correlations and everything of the sort. Now, this is something that's interesting, like, whoa, this is huge, this is big, right? When we look at the amount of us that may be struggling with these types of things, we may not feel that we are quote unquote diagnosed with it, but we all have some type of problems that we're suffering with. We're always kind of sitting here, whether it be sleep or whatever it is.
I'm so sorry, but can I just ask a question real quick to clarify what you said?
Yeah.
CBD, is that something that we get from other sources? Or is that something we make? or something that we make, or that we carry people with those issues naturally absorb less of?
Yep.
So,
We'll talk
sorry.
about that. Nope, good job raising the hand. This is a well choreographed dance. So you raise a good point, right? Like, hey, are these things natural, whatever it is in the body? Do we inherently produce them? Yes, and I'll get into a little bit of that. And so when we look at this, right, I'm going to use a fancy word here called ubiquitous. This just means everywhere, right? So like my children's toys are ubiquitous. By the way, who has the 6 children? Congratulations. Wow, I have 4. And I consider myself a small learner, or slow learner.
She has more.
I have more children.
Yeah, love it.
Wow. So it's funny because I showed a picture in Cincinnati to where I put the patch over my kid's lips and I said, it does work. It removes my biggest pain point. Because dinner was so much more enjoyable with those teenagers. All right, but anyways, talking about this, we find, so there's cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are a group of molecules. There's a variety of them, CBD, THC, and so forth. There's the endo. Endo means self. The endocannabinoid system. Our body makes cannabinoids, and it has 2 types of receptors that bind to those cannabinoids that are floating around in our body, called CB1 and CB2. These CB1 and CB2 receptors are kind of found everywhere. And what's more interesting is you find them through all vertebrates as well. And so as a scientist, you hit the jackpot. This system was discovered in the 1960s, right? And then they kind of went on to clone or to understand the sequence of them in the 1990s, these CB1 and CB2 receptors. And so when you sit here and you see something that is ubiquitous, meaning it's kind of throughout the whole body, and then you also see that it's kind of conserved throughout the vertebrates, you're thinking, I just found something that is so important. And so what they did is they created what's called a knockout mouse. Do you guys know what a knockout mouse is? A knockout mouse is where they can ultimately remove the gene from the mouse to see then what that gene functioned, right? If the mouse died, if the mouse was superhuman strength, whatever it was. So they did a knockout mouse of the receptors, thinking we just killed the endocannabinoid system, let's see what happens to these mice. Are they going to have cancer? Are they going to have more hair, less hair? Who knows? Let's see what happens. And do you know how disappointing it is, or it was for them? Guess what? The mouse lived just as long and it seemed normal. And so the scientists are like, what? This doesn't make sense. It's all through the body. It's all through the vertebrates, much of the animal kingdom. What's going on? But then they start to dive deeper into this as kind of science progressed, where they don't look at the extension of life. They start to look at different things of the quality of life. They found that the mice, with respect to the knockout, had significant learning disabilities, significantly higher levels of stress. And there was all of these things that were correlated. The mice did actually have an increased prevalence of stroke and heart disease, but they believe that was more correlated to the lifestyles that they were living of constantly being in stress. And so it was interesting. All of a sudden now the science is kind of getting into this kind of this area of quality of life, that there are certain genes with respect to memory formation, the vaulting of memories, meaning you want to repause certain memories and not think about them all the time, and so forth. And so they start to look more and more into this. Oh, I just did something here. These endocannabinoids, the ones the body makes, are significantly lower in individuals that may have anxiety or learning challenges or memory issues or pain even, right? And so now they start to look at all of these different things, and they find that the endocannabinoid system is correlated with all of these different cellular processes, right? All of these neurological transmitter signals, memory formation cells, pain cells, and they're wondering what's going on. And they start to dive in more and more. And they're realizing individuals where dopamine is released or serotonin is released is usually coupled with endocannabinoids to help regulate that. Do you guys know what dopamine is? Dopamine. That's what makes you feel good, right? So for example, it's funny, like when we think about our emotions and feeling good, we don't really think that there's a lot of biological stuff happening, but there is. Dopamine is the reward signal of the body. It's highly valuable and necessary, but when we think about it, it's been hijacked today by a lot of different things. It's also what causes addictions, right? So people on cocaine or methamphetamine, it causes a huge dopamine spike in the brain, lights it up. And that's why they get high, they're feeling euphoric, they love it. But then it drops, and the body is wanting that dopamine spike again, and so it goes and does it again, right? And that's really the basis of addiction. Well, dopamine is also very important. In fact, dopamine is initially experienced in the very first, when infants are very first born and they begin breastfeeding, there's certain saccharides or sugars in the breast milk that will actually cause a dopamine spike in the children's brain that then tells the baby, this is good, you're feeling good, do it again. Right? And that kind of does that. It also creates then a coupling with serotonin, which gives the feelings of love and so forth. Now, when we think of this, these have been hijacked, right? To where people don't look at good behaviors that ultimately and inherently naturally release dopamine to reward that which we want to do. It's been hijacked where everything from gambling to social media, right? A teenager on social media, they show those dopamine spikes going. Pornography, obviously the opiate addictions that are going, all of those have been hijacked. The dopamine system has been hijacked by those behaviors. And so that's where that addiction comes from. But it is also very important with respect to feeling good and helping with pain, endorphin receptors, helping with pain, GABA cells, memory formation, all of these things, and they're finding it's very, very involved in these. And so now when we look at this, this is, he's on the Harvard Publishing Group, he kind of wrote this, right? CBD has been touted for its wide variety of benefits. The FDA actually just recently approved this drug. This is an isolate, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. An isolate of CBD, meaning that it is derived or is synthetically made of just CBD and has been treated to help with very aggressive seizures. But in the same article, he talks about the overwhelming amount of evidence that is supported with respect to individuals sleeping, falling asleep, staying asleep. Right? When you look at it, there's the two greatest challenges people go to their doctor with. Number one is, I'm wanting to go to the bathroom and it's not happening as frequently as I'd like. And right behind that is, I'm not sleeping as much as I'd like. And when we think of this, we're just kind of seeing how important that endocannabinoid system is in sleep, memory formation, everything of the sort. So falling asleep and staying asleep. And then third, he talks about the amount of evidence that is suggesting with respect to pain, especially pain associated with inflammation. You know what? I might as well just read it rather than trying to do that. CBD is commonly used to address anxiety and for patients who suffer through the misery of insomnia. Studies suggest that CBD will help with falling asleep and staying asleep. CBD may offer an option for treating different types of chronic pain. A study from the European Journal of Pain showed using an animal model, CBD applied on the skin would help lower pain and inflammation due to arthritis. Another study demonstrated the mechanism by which CBD inhibits inflammatory and neuropathic pain, two of the most difficult types of chronic pain to treat. And so when we see this, we see just an overwhelming amount of evidence. Now, going back to the original way I opened this, when we know that our body makes these inherent cannabinoids, and we know it's involved in all these things from memory and sleep and pain moderation, things that just seem to be somewhat of an epidemic today. Why are we needing to supplement? And this is what's so puzzling. I think there's two reasons for this. We know that CBD and dopamine are correlated very close with each other. One releases the other, and they kind of protect each other from going about and causing addictive behaviors or whatever it might be. CBD is a little bit like a governor for the dopamine. Helps control it and also helps stimulate it when it's needed. And so when we think about this, how often are we on social media? How often is our environment today absolutely engineered to cause nothing more than dopamine spikes? Right? I sit down and watch TV 50 years ago, right, or 30 years ago, I was watching Murder, She Wrote. Right? Not necessarily causing an overwhelming amount of dopamine in the brain, right? Angela Lansbury's great, but she wasn't causing any dopamine spikes, right? And now what's happened is you will go on the TV and you'll see absolute fast-paced commercials that are caused to cause these types of dopamine spikes. The type of shows that are happening are very fast-paced, moving, bright flashes, everything of the sort, and they do that intentionally. You look at social media, very much the same way. And it is all about giving you that dopamine hit to where before you know it, you have spent 18 hours on Netflix binging. Yeah, and we don't think it's addictive, right? How many of you called into work because you're wanting to watch episodes 7 through 16? And those are the types of things that are happening. And so these dopamine things are firing. And CBD and dopamine are supposed to be with each other, but CBD can't keep up. And so we're finding addictions, and because of that, ultimately, all of these different pathways that are involved and kind of regulated by CBD in some form or another are falling short. Now we're having trouble falling asleep. We're having trouble staying asleep. We're finding kind of this continual pain that may be happening throughout our bodies. We may have challenges with memory. We may have types of disorders with respect to anxiety or talking with each other. And I have to be careful because I don't like talking to people, right? We were talking about that before. She's like, you don't like talking to people, do you? And I was like, right? I consider it a luxury with me, right? I'm saving the other person from the trauma, not me, right? But those are the types of things that we find, is that we are losing those types of things that are so important, but have just been hijacked. And so one, I think the demand of dopamine has gone through the roof. Second, as I said before, we have enzymes that will actually convert certain plant fats that we eat into our endocannabinoids. How often how many of us are actually getting fats from our plants? Yeah. When we think of the fats we're getting, it's usually in the form of dairy or meats, right? It's animal fats, or make up the vast majority of the fats we consume, right? We're not getting them through olives or avocados or whatever it might be, right? And so those are the things, is we're not supplying enough of those sources for, it's called the FAAH enzyme, to convert it into that. So one, we're not getting enough supply, and two, we're not able to keep up with the overwhelming demand that today's society is requiring. And so it's leading us into where we've got 75% of us on at least one medication. And so we need, I think, to do this. We can do the square. We should do the square. But we also have to realize how important it is to make sure that we are getting the proper nutrition in our bodies as well, right? We absolutely need to be addressing those shortfalls that are in our diet. So when we look at this, we find that CBD has an overwhelming amount of evidence to support that it's involved in a variety of different things today, everything from sleep to helping with mild pain, discomfort, muscle problem, calmness, unpleasant memories. This is another one, right? The vaulting of memories. We don't realize how important. We always talk about remembering different things as kind of the pitfall. It's just as important for us to vault memories as it is for us to recall memories, right? If we were unable to vault memories, imagine how difficult your life would be if you remembered everything, right? It would be very, very challenging. And so we have found over and over again that CBD is important for the vaulting of memories, so that we can ultimately, if the body's wanting to repress, or repress is the wrong word, but vault a certain memory or whatever it might be, it's more able to do that. And so these are the powerful things that we are seeing with respect to that CBD. Now, as I said before, there's a variety of CBD. Your body will produce a couple, I won't go into those. But when we look at the hemp plant, there are so many different CBD molecules or cannabinoid molecules that come with it. You have cannabinoid D, or CBD, which is the predominant one. THC, the fun one, right? The friend with money. CBN, CBDA, CBC, and so forth. Beta-caryophyllene, and so forth. All of these. This is called the, as Scott Johnson calls it, the entourage effect, right? To where you have this kind of coupling. And this is critical to do. Why do we need this entourage? The best way that I kind of illustrate this is, I always like to give this example. The National Institutes of Health did a study to where they looked at tens of thousands of people with respect to the correlation of vitamin A and cancer, lung cancer amongst the smokers, because they showed that individuals that smoked but also had a diet high in vitamin A were significantly less likely to develop lung cancer. Lung cancer is a horrible cancer. It's one of the hardest ones to treat. It is very, very difficult. And so the NIH was ecstatic over this. Hey, vitamin A, more vitamin A, less lung cancer among smokers. That's great. Let's do a big study, tens of thousands of people to take part in this. But it's hard to tell tens of thousands of people to eat healthy. I can't get 4 children to do it, right? I always feel like the world would be solved if we acted like we expect our children to do, right? You know, and it's impossible to get tens of thousands of people to eat their carrots and bell peppers or whatever it might be to get that vitamin A. So what do? Oh, let's just give them vitamin A supplement, right? A synthetic vitamin A, take it, you're good. They'll do that. And so they did that, and it was great. And so the study went on for years, and they were monitoring the prevalence of lung cancer, and all of a sudden, it was absolutely amazing. What was happening is there was a 250% increase in lung cancer amongst the people taking the synthetic vitamin A. Why the exact opposite? Well, I believe that what you are missing when you ultimately take a synthetic, even though the molecules look identical, you are missing those entourages. Scientists like to believe we know everything. I always call it the Dunning-Kruger. Do you guys know what Dunning-Kruger is? It was two psychologists, and they had this great graph to where they, you know, it's your confidence level on the y-axis, and then on the x is how much you know. And the less you know, you're exceptionally confident. And then the more you start to learn about something, you're like, whoa, I have no idea what I'm learning, right? And then you start to learn a little bit more, you get a little bit more confident. Scientists, we live in this like we know everything world, right? And so they think that that's the case. What we don't realize is when you eat that carrot, of course you're getting that vitamin A, but there are so many different compounds in there, thousands and thousands of different compounds that can be telling that vitamin A what cells to go into, how to behave, and a variety of other things. You're missing that. You're in essence sending your 16-year-old in a car without giving him GPS. He will not return home. That's what's happening. And so with this, you will get what's called full spectrum CBD, meaning CBD with the entourage. And what we've done is we've got 2 different forms of extracts to select for that CBD and their entourage. There's the water soluble, which means you take the hemp, you use water to extract it, and then there's also the CO2. This is the way to get the best entourage. And so you look at all these different entourages and the concentrations and everything of the sort that accompany them. And you're able to get that broad, full spectrum of those CBDs in that to accompany it, to give you that full impact that is so beneficial. And so when we look at this, we are able to ultimately deliver CBD in a way that is able to address those pitfalls that we may be having, that need of what we need, or that need that today demands. And so why are we so interested in solving these problems? I believe wholeheartedly because it is a natural compound in the body that we aren't able to address and meet today's demands with, can help solve a lot of the issues we're facing. So, but we want to do it properly. So at Zija, what we've done is we've actually combined CBD with white willow bark, cat's claw, and a couple other compounds here, and I'll talk about this. White willow bark, does anyone know what white willow bark is? Has anyone heard of aspirin? It's the same. That's where aspirin was initially discovered. Right? I'm going to go on a side tangent here. I'm sorry. You have to deal with it. I think the greatest problem that we have seen in natural health and wellness is the Supreme Court ruling in the early 2000s that you can't patent natural products. Now, a lot of you will say, hey, that's great. You can't patent natural products. It's easy to distribute. Everything is good. Problem is to show effectiveness, what happens is you have to do a clinical study, which may cost $700 million or $1 billion, right? And if I spend $1 billion and don't have exclusive rights on that herb, am I going to do that clinical study? No. The pharmaceutical industry loved it. They loved it. In fact, the case that actually took this was a study that was done with respect to the BRCA2 gene, which is correlated with breast cancer, and was an early indicator for individuals that are very susceptible to breast cancer. And they said, sorry, you can't patent it. We don't want you to patent that test because, well, BRCA2, that gene is considered natural. And I'm thinking, if our goal is to help individuals, we actually just removed an early indicator test off the market, ultimately exposing them to where it's too late. And so when we think about this, these greatest medicines that we've really discovered throughout history have all kind of come inherently naturally first. Penicillin, paclitaxel, right? That is the most commonly used chemotherapy drug and the most effective chemotherapy drug. It was initially discovered out of the bark of the California yew tree. Now, they get around it today, so the doctor, or the scientist or farm companies will actually say, oh, we want to conserve the tree, so you can't cut it down anymore, but we're going to patent a way to make it synthetically, right? And then they patent a way to make it synthetically. But you see what's happened is so many great solutions exist in nature, but they aren't being fully adopted because I honestly believe in many ways greed. And so what we have, we put white willow bark in here, a powerful thing to help alleviate pain, right? Cat's claw, very strong evidence with respect to inflammation and arthritic conditions. CoQ10 and black pepper extract are designed to help increase the absorption. So what we did is we created a patch with all of these types of things on it. Now, the question is why won't we just do it orally? Has anyone taken CBD oil? Raise your hand if you've taken CBD oil before. How's it taste? Awful.
Like tree bark.
Like tree bark?
I guess you're supposed to hold it in your mouth.
Yeah, to try to increase that absorption like a sublingual.
Bigger and nasal.
You ever heard of tree bark as the explanation? That's good, yeah.
Michigan was a kid.
Michigan people like trees.
But anyways, it tastes horrible. But what's crazy is you're only getting about 6% of it being absorbed in your body. Which means you spend $100 on CBD, you're getting $6 of benefit, right? That's typical. You can put a sublingual, right? That's where they tell you hold it on your tongue, increase the absorption a little bit better, but it's still not that great. Inhalation, right? Who's done this one before? It's funny, the people who raise their hand are the ones that you're like never expecting, right? Right? Inhalation. Problem is it actually does quite a bit of lung damage. Well, not quite a bit. There's evidence of significant lung damage. I think over the course of time, as you dive more and more into this, it's probably going to realize that it's not necessarily the best. Put it in brownies for those that are going to do it, right? And then transdermal is this other way, to where you're actually going to kind of get a sustained release throughout the day. And this is why, or I chose the transdermal. The reason is because I want to mimic what the body inherently is doing. I want to mimic it. When we look at CBD, it's not this huge spike in it. It's kind of a consistent dose throughout the day that our body uses. And it's actually then will be stored in the fat cells when it doesn't need it and then quickly release it when it does. And so what we did is we created this, the Entune Square, where it's just a transdermal patch that you can put on. You apply it in thin skin areas, unless there's areas of localized pain, you can put it there. I dealt with that. I want to talk about this a little bit. Actually, before I do that, I'll talk about this first. This is, in essence, an illustration of skin, Is it just me, or zoom up on hair follicles like this is the most disgusting? You realize just how close we are to spiders. And anyways, you got the fat cells. CBD will kind of come across this, it'll store in the fat cells, and then it will gradually go into the bloodstream. Now, in this study, this is a study that we did to where we gave it either intravenously, or orally, or via the Entune, right? They don't like me saying this, but I'm going to say it. These were rats, right? Hopefully that doesn't offend anyone, right? They lived, they just put a patch on the back, all right? And we draw blood at a whole bunch of different time points, right? And then here on the y-axis, it was blood serum levels of CBD. And so obviously, right, these aren't linear time points. The graph isn't made to scale, right? This is like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, but then you come out here, it's like day 5, right? So it's not linear. Right, so we injected it, we gave them orally, and of course you then see it 15 minutes later, you see it really high in the blood. Well, of course, I just injected in the blood and then I pull the blood, it's very high. But it actually drops so fast. Why? Because the body doesn't like high CBD levels. That's not where it's supposed to be. And it will quickly drop that. I believe that there's inherent damages that come with huge amounts in short periods of time. Think akin to dopamine, right? If our whole level is to get more dopamine in the body, you just go do meth. True. Right. That fires dopamine so fast. But again, we realize not necessarily the best. You got awkward mug photos later in life, right? Not the best course of action. And what happens is those dopamine producing cells also completely burn out. That's why individuals that have had meth problems in their youth ultimately are significantly higher to develop Parkinson's and other disorders later in life, because those dopamine producing cells are completely fried. They're just spent, right? And so it's just damage. And so CBD, they bring it down. If your goal is to get a lot of CBD in the blood, be careful, right? Be careful. I think it's good for acute disorders. That's why that medication with respect to epilepsy, that's great. It's an acute disorder that you're addressing. But for continual thing, that's not what you're wanting to do. And so what we see is the Entune has this kind of low level, right? This is day 4. Now what's interesting is all of a sudden it spiked. There are multiple rats and they spiked in all of them at this time. And this is what's crazy. Why do you think it spiked?
Stimulate production in
To stimulate?
your own production.
Fat releases.
So CBD, that which if it comes in this way, right, to where the liver isn't working, metabolizing, it will store it in the fat, and then it will release it when it needs it, right? And how awesome is this, right? Like all of you guys, where your wife's been telling you to go on diets, right? You've been ultimately making sure you've got your CBD reservoirs. Good thing you didn't listen to him. Anyways, but what happens is this was actually, I was doing all these time points. And then there was a Sunday where I didn't come in and draw blood, and it was Monday morning. We don't feed them on Sunday. So they're fasting, right? They're fasting on that day. And all of a sudden, it released it out of the fat cells. Why? One, they're tapping into their fat reserves. But what that CBD is doing then is it's going and it's complementing dopamine. Why on earth would they want a dopamine when they're fasting? Anyone know?
So they're happy?
Has anyone had a Thanksgiving meal like turkey and cranberries and mashed potatoes in July? It's kind of like, great, you know? But come November, when you have it, it tastes so much better. Do you know why that is? It's because it's like Pavlov's dogs. Your body wakes up in the morning, you know it's Thanksgiving. And your body starts to produce dopamine. And that makes that food taste that much better. It's making you crave it and want it. So, and then it ends up tasting that much better. Your experience, the colors are more vibrant. It's like that one Claritin commercial.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden it's like before dopamine and after dopamine, like vibrant and life is great. That's what dopamine's doing. It actually gives this like rewarding, fruitful experience. That's why you need that anticipation of Thanksgiving to really make it taste better, right? And what's happening is that dopamine is then being released, CBD and dopamine, causing that to where it's like saying to mice, I'll make this food taste good. Hurry, go find some. Get hungry, go do it. And it's creating that reward mechanism for them. Now, how awesome is this, right? We aren't hijacking the dopamine system. We're utilizing it the way it should be. When we think about how dopamine is inherently released in the body, right? As I mentioned before, the interactions of the breastfeeding child, eating a meal, there's a variety of things that ultimately cause that dopamine to be released in life. And it is very, very powerful when properly harnessed. Who exercises a lot here? All right. Who, did you raise your hand there? I saw a hand raised over here. All right, how often do you exercise? 5 days a week. All right, these people here sitting to your right, do they know you? Are they family? Or is this the awkward stranger where there's 12 empty seats and you just decide to snuggle up? All right, 5 days a week, what do you do, like CrossFit?
No, just weight training.
Just weight training, okay? Just weight training. Is this, who is this? Is this your father? Or?
Yeah.
What is he like if he goes like 4 or 5 days without exercising? Is he enjoyable to be around?
No, he gets frustrated.
He gets irritable? It's because he's that dopamine, which is usually fired when we're exercising, he's going through dopamine withdrawals. It's as if you have a drug addict that doesn't have the drug. But that's an inherent natural dopamine response. It's creating it to be addicted for a good behavior, right? It's not hijacked by the poppy plant. It's ultimately hijacked by what the body inherently wants. It produces that runner's high. It produces that euphoria, right? When they think back, they believe that there's that runner's high, that euphoria, to encourage individuals to go hunt back when we were ultimately hunting for food, right? It would make it an enjoyable experience. It would make it, and so they'd be out doing those types of things, running or whatever it was, and it would create that. And so when people don't do it after they've been doing it for a while, all of a sudden, it's like you're on a road trip with a person who's trying to quit smoking. Don't do it. Right? Dad, send them to the gym. Right? Those are the things that we do. And so what happens is when you start to exercise now, you've stored up all that CBD, you're tapping into those fat cells, the fat cells are releasing that fat into the blood, is converting it into sugar, the sugar is giving you the energy, the ATP, everything of the sort, but now you're getting that dopamine. You're now getting addicted to running. You're now getting addicted to exercise. You're now getting addicted to that which the body knows is good for itself. Right? And that is the power of this, right? Of what we're able to do when we properly utilize the body's inherent response system. And so a lot of people will say, how much CBD is on the square? I'll tell you right now, if you're looking for an amount of CBD and just saying I want to get a lot, that is not the right solution. You want to have a continual dose throughout that is ultimately then released when the body craves it. I will be the first to admit, anyone that tells you that a lot is the best is wrong, right? History has time and time again indicated that that's not the case. The best solution is to inherently let the body determine what it wants and use it appropriately. And so once it's there, we'll then go into the blood system. Once it's in the blood system, CBD actually can cross the blood-brain barrier, which isn't surprising since it's so involved in the dopamine release, neurotransmission, GABA cells, memory formation, and so forth. And so this is the benefits, right? There was a wonderful study that was done with respect to CBD in mice with memory formation. To what they did is they gave mice, they depleted them with CBD, right, the knockout mouse, and then they gave, they had these mice then in a maze where they would then go for the food. And they found that the CBD mouse that had the knockout, one, it wouldn't go for the food. Why? Why do you think it didn't go for the food? It wasn't enjoyable for it. It didn't get that, hey, it's Thanksgiving Day, right? It tasted more like, I don't know, the Hilton cookie they give you when you check in.
You like those cookies?
Checking out tomorrow morning. Anyways, drive, the motivation, the ambition. And two, They also believed that once it would go back to find the food, it couldn't remember how to get there. Right? It would go into the basement and couldn't remember why it was going there. So these are the things that we see time and time again. Oh, beautiful. Now, as I said before, there's a variety of different things that these squares are being used for, right? And so how can we kind of enhance or get specific benefits? You can actually couple it with the different essential oils. Put 1 or 2 drops of these in the center and just use it in the middle. The reason you don't want to do the edges is because it will kind of remove the adhesive property and then it falls off. So kind of leave the edges there, right? So if you're wanting to kind of get the enhanced entourage, you can couple it with copaiba or black pepper. If you're looking for calm feelings, right, you're getting ready to take a test or go to the in-laws, whatever it might be, a little bit of pure tranquility or calming breeze or duct tape on their faces. Mayo True Lavender or vetiver, get better sleep, Thera-Ease for muscle and so forth. And so you kind of couple it with it to get that enhanced benefit. And I think that's it. So I have a few minutes here for any questions. We got about 15 minutes for questions? Yes?
What about using a skin prep pad? Does that change the amount that's absorbed? Like if you're having a lot of trouble with sweating and it's staying on?
So I've heard a few people saying that. If that's the case, you can actually just put it in a place that you don't sweat as much.
It comes off, and my daughter really sweats so much at night that I'm having a hard time.
Just keeping it on?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can maybe kind of put a little bit of a wrap around it then.
Okay.
Like a mace bandage or
Will
something.
that change the absorption? Do you
No.
think the skin prep
Especially with her
will
sweating,
protect?
it's coming off really quick. Meaning like that's
Yeah.
pulling it off really quick.
When you do going like for drug testing or something like that, like when you gotta go for a job, does it, do you drop 30? You drop 30? Will it come back for CBD or something?
Yeah. Yeah. So she wants to know if you'll test dirty. We've never seen a positive test. I won't say you'll pass though. And the reason I won't say that is because there's so many different tests. The NCAA actually doesn't even allow you to have a certain amount of caffeine in your blood, right? And so I'd hate for somebody to like, who knows what they're testing or what. Again, we are well below the 0.3% THC, right? And so there's so low THC, you're more likely to have THC in your blood from walking past your neighbor's house. Right? Or going to a Michigan State football game.
That would be you and them. That would be you and them.
How's it? They do it more in Ann Arbor?
Oh, yeah.
No.
I can afford the good stuff. My wife, she wanted to go to Michigan State, so I better be careful. But, so those, you should be fine. I've never seen positive, but I can't say like ubiquitously.
Is there an absorption rate to say like through transdermal versus like the 6% and the?
So we don't know exactly what it is. We just know based upon the concentrations, it's much higher than what it is. The challenge of when you do it transdermally, we know how much comes off. We're at like the high 90s that comes off, right? So we assume that it's going into the body. The problem is because it can be stored in the fat cells, it's hard for us. We'd have to like get all the fat and isolate that as well as the blood to get that true. And that's, I don't know how to do that. So, yes.
I have a bunch of questions. I'm sorry. So, if your system is low on endocannabinoids already, like
Yeah.
if you're somebody who's just on the low end, does that reduce the dopamine availability when someone is working out? Like you were mentioning that because I got to tell you, there are some of us who don't get that high.
Oh.
And it's really
It's a
horrible.
fable, to be honest.
It's really horrible.
Trust it from the scientists.
Is that something
You
where
guys
you're
want to see?
saying?
Yeah, you want to see like
Would you posit that they are low on that scale to begin with?
most likely. Most
Okay.
likely. But it's hard to say. There could be some reasons. Yeah, I can tell you right now. Anyone who's like, oh, I love running. Bull crap. It's like the people that say, oh, the book was so much better than the movie. You just want to brag that you know how to read. Right? That's all they're doing. No, that's true. It's likely, it could be a variety of different things. It could be actually precursors to the dopamine production. It could be cannabinoids, right?
Okay.
But cannabinoids is one of the areas they could look at.
How do you know how much like the patch releases? There's someone that's going to be bigger than me or smaller than me. Should they have the same level?
And this is the beautiful thing of this, right? By using it transdermally, your body will ultimately use that which it needs and store what it doesn't need fat. And so this is great. And so you're able to kind of use one square for everyone in size.
Okay, well, so would it be a chance that it wouldn't be enough for somebody?
Yeah, so some people will use more, right? You can use quite a few more if you'd like. But again, I don't want huge blood serum levels. And to me, that's not a good thing to have that continuously. But you can put a, cut 2 or 3, right? If you want the Snoop Dogg effect.
What about, will it have any kind of effect, with medications, things like that?
Yeah, because the dose is ultimately continual and small, you should be fine, right? High levels of CBD, you need to be careful with certain types of blood thinners, but in this case, you're fine.
I've been asked a question about dosage as far as comparing, say, 2 milligrams of oil to the transdermal patches.
Yeah.
How do you?
So it's interesting, when we go back to this slide, these were the same amount that we kind of gave orally and everything. And you can see we get so much more. You're probably getting like 5 times bang for your buck. It's hard to equate again because we don't know exactly how much is going in there, but right around I'd say 5 to 10 times bang for your buck. But you're getting that continual dose throughout. And so just every day you're getting it as your body needs it so that you get that dopamine spike when you're saying goodbye to your kids or when they're saying goodbye to you. You're getting that dopamine spike when you need it or whatever it might be, right?
What kind of has been the effect, or is it usable with people that have had like heart conditions? I have a friend who's had a heart transplant.
Yeah. And so it's a great way to stitch it up after the surgery. It's fine to use in those situations. Yep.
You mentioned that it is not as hard on your liver.
Yeah.
Meaning that it does have some impact on your liver. What is it?
So when you take it orally, the reason you're only getting 6% into your blood is because your liver is metabolizing a lot of it. So I don't want to say it's hard on the liver, but if the liver is metabolizing 94% of it, roughly, you have to assume it's rather taxing, right? You don't know how clever scientists are. This is what happens when you lock us into a lab and don't go on dates with us, right? What they did is they found a gene that ultimately metabolizes alcohol, right? There's certain populations of individuals that are very susceptible to alcohol, right? Mainly in the Asian communities, you'll find that they have 1 beer and they're dancing on the table, right? And then you'll have certain populations to where they can drink 50 beers and they're not feeling anything, right? And what they found is there was a gene that would actually metabolize that. And they called it's alcohol dehydrogenase, right? That does it. But the name of the gene they call cheat date. But that is the reason that too much alcohol consumption is part of the liver. Your liver is inherently trying to metabolize it, break it down, because it's inherently difficult for the body, right? And then what happens is once the alcohol consumption goes too high, then the liver says, I give up, going to the blood, right? And so that's kind of where it's at. And so there's the assumption, because so much is being metabolized by the liver, it's hard on the liver. But there's been no studies to dictate that. But through this, it's not going through the liver, so it's also great for children as well. Yes, in the back.
Is it safe for pregnant nursing mothers?
Yes.
Are these single doses of the IV, the oral, and the transdermal?
Yep.
And then I know when you look at sustained release transdermal products, most of the time on the front end, they're not as rapid, right? So we see the IV go up really quickly. Do you ever see the front end of that?
Yeah. So this is where I said again, I have to be careful here because this isn't linear. So this was like 15 minutes and then this was like an hour, right?
So how rapid? I mean, we would expect the IV to spawn right into the bloodstream immediately, right? So how rapid?
We see it in the serum around 30 minutes. Okay. But again, based upon local discomfort, you're likely getting it sooner, right? Because it takes time to go into the bloodstream. You are getting like different areas of the bloodstream.
I've had people ask me to save money if they can cut it in half.
Yeah.
And it would work.
Yeah, well, obviously we made the dose to be as mimic as much as possible. yeah, but I'm not gonna be the person that says open up the wallet and, yeah, it's something that's
They were
very.
just afraid for their kids, you know, I know you just explained that it was.
Yeah, I put a full patch or full square on my children, but yeah, I totally understand if they wouldn't do it.
I have a friend who is very progressive and he's so progressive with MS and he's in a wheelchair and he has pain and we've used the patch and it's really made it so he can get more sleep at night. When Dr. Johnson shared how the endocannabinoid system affects all the other systems, what kind of a effect could that have on his, like, could that help him get a little better, or?
Yeah, so MS is a little bit tricky. We don't have a known cure for this, but this is the beautiful thing. Like a lot of times people with MS, challenges they have are sleep, horrible amount of sleep, right? Which impacts the quality of life. And ultimately when you're struggling with sleep, you may have then greater challenges that you're dealing with. And in no way is this curing or treating or whatever with MS, right? No way am I gonna ever make that statement. But I can tell you for an individual who's likely suffering from MS, a good night's sleep makes all the difference in the world. And these are the things that are very powerful with that and can help with those types of things. In the back.
Is it okay to use these patches if you're trying to get pregnant and you've had a heck of a time getting pregnant?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You guys want to? How open are you guys to kind of kind of studies on CBD? I actually did a study with CBD on women that they were more likely to orgasm with CBD. Just rolling around?
Yeah.
A bed sheet of patches. I think we're gonna sell out.
I have somebody asking on my live right now. They're in Watertown tomorrow night. They're going to see you, and they want to know how effective it is for their grandchildren with autism.
Yeah, and again, autism, actually, in that same thing where I was talking about the emotional, the whole study was actually focused on autism. There's evidence to suggest with individuals with autism have lower inherent CBD levels. I think you could find some stuff with respect to maybe better sleep, potential verbal skills, potentially like anxiety type of experiences. Is probably where you'd see it. But again, I never want to give the impression like we're curing autism. Little side note, synthetic vitamins, stop taking them. Anyone who's taking the synthetic multivitamins, stop. Not only is it correlated with lung cancer, there's a study done at Cambridge with respect to prenatal multivitamins and the increase in autistic children, specifically the high amounts of B vitamins.
Who is it not safe for?
Who is it not safe for?
Is that a big list, small list?
I don't know if the list exists, to be honest.
The devil.
Yeah. So I can't think of something at this time. Children under 2, just because it's on the package to say 2 or older.
She wants to know how long a person that has blood in their cancer in their blood could use a patch.
They can use it indefinitely. It's fine. It's safe for them to use. All right, we'll do one more, and then I probably should get going before I have to get myself into trouble. Pick your favorite.
Me? Oh, come on.
Might be able to talk to him afterwards.
I don't know, she's raising her hand quite high back there.
Man.
Yeah, I'm looking at you. You just looked behind you.
You got slighted.
Who did?
Over there. They told you to pick her favorite.
We've got time for 2 more.
Go ahead.
Have you tried it with anybody with ADHD?
We haven't looked specifically at that. Again, with respect to everything else you're kind of seeing in those, it'd be interesting and hopefully optimistic that it would work.
My husband has it, and
next one is in regards to individuals who've had like a previous opioid addiction. For those individuals, because they tend to have more likely to have depression, also more sensitivity to pain, has this been a good alternative to help to regulate dopamine release a little bit more?
Yeah, in fact, there were some studies, and again, it's rather colloquial, meaning not well studied, it's kind of casual studies that have been done. CBD helping individuals with opiate addictions as well, because you are binding to those same opiate receptors, but doing it in a non-stimulatory fashion.
Right, especially because from opioids to marijuana to get with that, then they're having a lot of other effects as well.
Good. Well, I'll just sign off today. It's been an absolute pleasure being in Grand Rapids. I've got to drive through Chicago. Is it better to go up through the UP? So wish me luck.
Yeah.
I was actually born in Chicago. Alright, so I'm going back to my roots a little bit tomorrow. But I'll be in Wisconsin tomorrow. It's been an absolute pleasure coming to Grand Rapids. You guys have been wonderful. I love coming to Michigan. There's a special place in my heart for you guys. And thanks for all you do. Keep trying to better yourself. Again, I want to echo, right, this is, if I can leave one sentiment with you, it is we have more control of our health than we think. We kind of think that we've been kind of dealt a certain deck of cards, or that, you know, this is the way I am. We can control way more than we think with respect to diet and exercise, and especially a plant-based diet, right? My name is truly Plant, by the way. That's not, but a plant-based diet, studies have shown tremendously the power of that with reversing diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And so really embrace living that lifestyle, and let's see if we can get 85% of us depleted in one nutrient down, and let's see if we can get us off of 75% of us being on medications to, let's try to turn it the other way around. And that doesn't include birth control too, by the way. That's everything else.
Sounds like it might increase that.
Yeah, if you did that. So I want to encourage you guys, take control of your health. You can do it. And I applaud you for taking that first step for being here tonight. And I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing, watching or being, and you took that first step tonight of taking control of your health and realizing that it impacts more than just your waistline. It can make your life that Claritin commercial and make life more enjoyable. It can make relationships more profound. All of these things are tied together. And so thank you, it's been an absolute pleasure.